Well, as you've probably seen in the news, there's a beagle camp at Whitton where they are protesting against cruelty to beagle dogs. I went there last week and this is what happened. I'm at the beagle camp near Whitton and speaking to Mel. Mel, what's going on here?
Well, as you can see, there's a permanent residence here now, people who are protesting against MBR Acres and their business of selling beagle puppies to the research industry. This camp's been going on for about 3 weeks now. The campaign against MBR Acres has been running for over a year. So this, as you can see, is clearly an escalation of that. The camp's here to secure the future of these beagles. We want these beagles out. We want the trade in dogs for experimentation to end. We're getting a broad base of public support for this campaign, and we're also getting an increasing number of scientists who are speaking out against the use of animals in research, that these animals are not predictive models for researching human disease. And we also have a situation where, the UK government recently recognised animal sentience, and yet the Animal Welfare Bill doesn't recognise these laboratory beagles. These dogs at home now, if you ill-treat your dog at home, you can receive up to a 5-year sentence. That act doesn't cover the dogs in here, but there is no difference between the beagles in here and the dogs sat on your sofa at home, and that is something that has to change.
What does MBA stand for?
Now, MBR stands for Marshall Bios's Resource, so that's the company name. They're an American company. They supply dogs, large numbers of dogs around the world, and this is their English part of their operation. So MBR Acres, until relatively recently, if you drove down this road, you just see a sign saying MBR Acres Limited. There'll be no idea whatsoever what was actually going on in here, and that's what we find out increasingly. The people who've lived here, some people for 20 years, had no idea this was a dog factory, and it is a dog factory. This is a company that treats these dogs as products. They are products to be sold to the research industry, and people are outraged by it. And many local people who lived here for many years had no idea this was going on. In fact, you probably wouldn't, unless you stopped your car and took a walk in the field and suddenly could hear the barking of the dogs in the sheds. So that's what Marshall Bioresources are. They're a company that sells to them a product, and that product is beagle puppies to the research industry.
So this is basically a kennel, is it, or do they breed them here?
No, the dogs are bred here. This is not a kennel facility. The puppies leave here at 16 weeks of age in the backs of air-controlled units in vans to be sold to laboratories across the UK. So this is not a kennels, this is a business that sells animals to the research industry.
And how many people here at the minute?
It varies each day. I think today there's probably 20 or 30 people here. We've had up to 250 people here. And the numbers are growing, the support base is growing, and it's not just this is not just a campaign by animal rights people. This has now become a people's campaign. It's the people that are standing up for these dogs. It's the people that are demanding these dogs have a secure, safe future, and that this industry that supplies dogs for the research industry, and they go to toxicity research, which basically means they'll be poisoned to death over anything up to a 90-day period, and they will suffer. And when you factor into, obviously there must be great moral outrage about that, but when you factor in the fact that scientists themselves are also saying these have no predictive value, these tests, so surely the time has come to end it, and that's what we're going to do. We are going to end this trade in dogs to the UK research industry.
How do you all manage to find time off work to do this? Do you take holiday?
People take holidays, people are self-employed, there are people who retired, there's retired nurses here, so you get this whole mix. And obviously you get people swapping over all the time, because people do have to go home, return to work, people do have to go home and have families and other commitments, we all do. But what we do is, as a collective campaign, the Free the MBR Beagles and the Camp Beagle, between us, we manage to keep this presence here. And that's something that is really amazing about this campaign, is that people are working together in the best way they can to secure the future for these dogs.
And are MBRA taking any notice?
Well, it's very difficult with MBR. They're not very forthcoming in terms of justifying what they do or answering our criticisms or questions. So I'm sure they are taking notice. I fail to see how they can't be taking notice. And also they'll be aware about the growing public tide of anger against this, and also the fact that even now in the Parliament questions are being asked about the use of these dogs in this kind of research. So MBR can't live in an island isolated from this. They are now very much under the spotlight.
And what do you actually want to happen?
Well, ultimately the first thing is the welfare of these dogs. These dogs must have a secure future and not be sold to a laboratory. That is the first thing. We want those dogs handed over to responsible charity or dog rescue organisation where they can be cared for. That's the first thing. The second thing is we want to see an end to the trade in dogs to the research industry. So there's two-pronged approach here. But obviously, first and foremost, we must secure a safe future for these dogs in here.
Right, as Mel said earlier on, coming along the road, you probably wouldn't even notice this facility was here. It's a gate about 4 or 5 metres wide in between a hedge, and at the moment it's clogged up with animal cages and cars. How do people get in to feed the animals?
We right from the beginning we've been clear that the staff must be allowed in to feed the animals. So the cars are moved and any obstructions are moved when those workers go in and out. We're not about causing suffering to those dogs. We understand that the staff have to go in to feed them and their daily needs have to be met. So that's always been allowed to go on. What we can't allow to happen is vans to turn up here and take the dogs to the laboratories. That's something we cannot allow to happen anymore.
So if a van turns up to take dogs away, what happens then?
Well, I think it's quite clear that people will be here and they will let it be known that those vans can't take the dogs to laboratories. As I said, we're quite prepared and always have been, and accept that the staff who work here and take day-to-day care of the dogs must be allowed to go about their work, and we won't frustrate that. However, we are about, as I've said right from the start, this campaign is about ending the trade in these dogs to UK laboratories, and with the support of the public as well as scientists and other organisations, we feel very confident that we can do that.
Surely, if you're going to obstruct vans taking dogs away, won't the police get involved?
Well, obviously the police have an operational view on this, but also they also have to be aware that this is as I said before, this is a people's movement now for these dogs. In terms of what actions the police do and don't take, I mean, that's something they have to decide, but they also have to bear in mind very much what's happening here and think about that. So as I said, the day-to-day care of the dogs is paramount. We won't jeopardise that. We care about what happens to them, and we understand that a part of our duty that is to let the staff go in and make sure the dogs are fed and their day-to-day care needs taken care of. But in terms of them being returned to laboratories to be using toxicity research, to be poisoned to death, that is something that we don't think should happen anymore.
Lovely, Mel, thank you very much. I then contacted MBR Acres, the company involved, and asked them for their comments.
It's obviously a well-intentioned campaign, it's just not very well informed. And there have been arrests for harassment, hot coffee's been thrown at the animal care staff, who require police escorts, they've been hassling the vet. It's less a peaceful protest and more somebody kicking over the bins at the front of your house and demanding to be let in. I don't know why they think people are deliberately poisoning dogs, but I suspect it's a misunderstanding of experiments that are done to check that a medicine we think is safe enough, based on our non-animal tests, is actually safe enough. And how that works is scientists give an animal a low dose of a drug, not enough to deliberately make the animal ill, for several weeks, usually as a pill in their food. And this is in the hope that it won't harm the animal, because if it does, that's the end of the road for whatever medicine you were developing. I mean, the animals are usually euthanized at the end of the experiment, exactly as you would put down an animal at the vet. There is definitely that. And it's to check that there weren't any hidden effects on the organs that haven't manifested as disease yet. But nobody sets out to poison a dog to death. You don't carry on the experiment if the dog unexpectedly falls ill. Equally, if a product in your home says safe for pets, that's because they spray some in the corner of a room. They let an animal investigate the room, and if it's unharmed, it's safe for your pet. Without that testing, then you're putting that risk onto a far larger cohort of pet and wild animals. And if they're poisoned, it won't be in a controlled environment where you can offer immediate veterinary care and stop the experiment. We can see from the data that when a medicine's safe in an animal, then 86% of the time it's safe in a stage 1 human trial too, which rises close to 100% when you add in data from second species and all the non-animal tests we do at the same time as animal tests, things like cell cultures, computer modelling. So the tests aren't ineffective, that's just something that the activists say to try to gloss over the huge ethical costs of their proposals. I mean, they have been saying it for 150 years and it's never been true. Look at the medicines we've got, it has delivered. So There aren't currently any alternatives to this, but we are actively looking for them, and in fact we have a National Centre for Researching Alternatives established in 2004 that gets about £10 million in core funding each year, and they've got a specific project hoping to discover new ways of avoiding dog tests, and that's due to report in 2026. We're obviously not there yet, but we are investing in the future, and the biosciences is leading the way in that future. I mean, there's no conspiracy to use animals unnecessarily. The medicines regulator, which requires the experiments, is actively engaged with the latest alternatives research and actually undertakes some of this research themselves. There's a gap in the activist logic that the people who require these tests do not and cannot make any money from them because they're a government agency fulfilling a statutory duty to protect the public. So while there aren't alternatives, we have little choice but to carry on with the UK's pragmatic approach, which is only using animals when there's no alternative, and when we do have to use them, making it as kind as we can. I mean, less than half of 1% of experiments with dogs are severe, for instance, whereas 75% would be something mild, like a blood test. We don't test cosmetics or tobacco or household chemicals, but there are still a lot of diseases that we could be better at treating, and that's what the vast majority of this is about. And it's also why they have specific extra welfare laws just for lab animals. Breeding the animals specially so that they're healthy, disease-free and comfortable in a lab is part of doing things as kindly as possible, and it's why there are specialist breeders with the extra skills and facilities required to do that. You have automated lighting on site, automated food and water, exercise areas, animals are kept in family groups. And breeding lab animals in the UK is of course far better than flying them in from abroad, or allowing the experiments to happen outside of the world's strictest lab animal welfare regulations. I imagine the celebrities and others backing this campaign are thinking it's a no-brainer. They'll come off like an animal rights legend, and what's the worst could happen? Well, the worst that can happen is that these necessary experiments that we don't have alternatives for yet move somewhere without such strict animal welfare laws, and this is not at all unlikely. The most likely outcome from the campaign is increased animal suffering to create the medicines that we know you use. So the protesters could show you an emotive picture of a beagle, and doctors could show you an emotive picture of a sick child in a hospital, but really the question for any society is how to balance those two things. And the UK really can be proud of itself that it goes further than anywhere else to get that balance just right.
The other people involved, of course, are the local police. I asked them for an audio statement, but they sent me a written statement instead, and this is what they said. Our approach has always been to provide a proportionate response to the ongoing protests at Whitton near Huntingdon, and balance the right to protest with the right of staff at the site to go about their lawful work. Our aim is to ensure a safe environment for the protesters to express their views and staff at the site to do their work, which is protected under the Serious Organised Crime and Police Act 2005. We will continue to provide a police presence to ensure the safety of all involved, and we will intervene where necessary to ensure the law is upheld. Well, that was a recording done at the Whitton Beagle Camp with Mel, a response from the company, MBR Acres, and a comment by the police. We will report back of any developments.